Hello, everyone, and welcome to the MMA Island podcast. I am Jack Kennedy alongside Keelan McNamara, and this is your podcast for the latest in MMA. Today, we are joined by a very special guest, Zach Harkness. Zach is the vice president, a fight analyst, and a video journalist for MMA Island. Zach, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Happy to be on.
I'm Jack Kennedy, and they hit a lot harder, in my opinion, too.
Mace Martinez. I don't think that's going to happen because those are two of the hottest divisions in the UFC right now.
I'm Keelan McNamara. He is here to stay, and I see him being a huge problem.
And this is the MMA Island podcast.
Absolutely. So before we go into all of the topics for today, we do have to start off with a couple of shout outs. The first is, obviously, you guys know, our third partner, Mace Martinez, one of the co-founders of this very podcast, is unfortunately going to have to step away for quite a while. I just personally wanted to say that just a big thank you to Mace. He is the reason the podcast is where it is today. He's such a good person and a great friend. And obviously we love talking about MMA with him. So Mace, just thank you so much. And it's been great while it lasted.
Yeah, just real quick to add on to that, Mace is such a fantastic friend to all of us. He's such a beloved figure here at MMA Island. I was saying to the guys earlier, he was, along with Jack, of course, he was so welcoming to me whenever I joined the podcast as a co-host, and nothing but a massive amount of love for the brothers. So always the best, Mace, and we look forward to having you back on soon.
Yeah, absolutely. And Keelan, you want to go ahead and give a shout out to, obviously, Marvin Hagler, legendary boxer, unfortunately passed away. Go ahead with that.
Yeah. All you guys who watch regularly, you'll know that I am quite a big boxing fan. And of course, very sadly, on Saturday, we lost one of the true greats in Marvelous Marvin Hagler, one of the greatest pound-for-pound boxers of all time, a true king of the middleweight division during the 1980s, during its heyday. Undisputed middleweight champion for 7 years from 1980 to 1987, fought in some of the best fights we've ever seen, never ducked anybody, fought the greatest fighters of his time, Roberto Duran, Tommy the Hitman Hearns, Sugar Ray Leonard, you name them, he did fight them. Won his titles in 1980 in London against a man called Minter, fought all the way, I think it was Alan Minter, held him for 7 years until he lost a very hotly disputed decision to a GOAT in Sugar Ray Leonard, and just had the perfect career, never knocked down really, very, very few lost fights, and a true legend of combat sports, in many ways a pioneer for beautiful sports to come, such as mixed martial arts. May he rest in peace, and a true stalwart of the combat sport history, no question. Rest in peace, Marvelous Marvin Hagler.
Yeah, I don't think any of us could have said it better. Absolutely. Well, let's go ahead and transition into the good stuff. MMA, we all love it. Let's go ahead and get into our topics today. And we're going to go ahead and get started off with, we had a very interesting, an amazing fight night as a whole. It was a great fight night, topped off by a very much anticipated main event, Leon Edwards versus Belal Muhammad. Zach, let's go ahead and get started with you. Obviously, the fight ended with an unfortunate eye poke that had the fight stopped. What are your thoughts on this fight as a whole, and just what do you make of the whole mess and the aftermath of it?
So going into this week, I was singing Leon Edwards' praises because someone needs to. He is, in my opinion, the second best welterweight in the UFC. Skill-wise, he's just an incredibly amazing fighter to watch. And when I heard that the fight with Muhammad was booked, it just kind of seemed like a perfect stylistic matchup for him, as Leon does so well against guys who base their games off of forward pressure. And that is Belal Muhammad. Belal Muhammad is, I'm going to push you to the cage. I'm going to punch you, shoot for a lot of takedowns. You'll defend some, but I'm going to get you at least once. Leon can pull people into the clinch when they pressure him forward. And he did that a lot. And the fight really just showed what I thought would happen. He was miles ahead on the feet. He was much faster. He was much more powerful. He had the technique advantage. And honestly, it's just so unfortunate what happened, because now he's going to get even more hate on his name, because there's a few people in MMA. There's people who don't really know who Leon Edwards is. There's a lot of people who hate him. And then there's the small, tight-knit fan community, and that's a vast minority. And it's going to get even smaller now because people don't like fighters who eye poke. And I get how some people say it's intentional. I don't think it is. But I think his performance was incredible. I think that in that first round, he had Bilal Muhammad dead to rights. And if that fight had continued, I think he would have gotten his first finish in a while.
Yeah, I think Zach's just given you an excellent summary of Saturday night. We covered Leon Edwards last week and his inactivity and the fights that he rejected. And I do think that feeds into what Zach just mentioned about a growing minority of fans who truly appreciate Leon Edwards. And I think that's a main reason why, a lot of the newer fans to our sport couldn't see why he was rejecting the fights that he did. Whether it was right or not is a separate question entirely. But what Leon Edwards did achieve on Saturday night was showing how good he is. And, it's like they say, you all must have forgot, because Leon Edwards looked fantastic. As Zach just said, streets ahead on the feet. I was actually really impressed with how good his stand-up was. I thought, a really, really tough guy like Bilal Muhammad, and he was piecing him up. That round one was as solid as a stand-up display as you're ever going to see. Yeah. I thought he was fantastic. I thought his kicking, his switching up between the striking, boxing, and the kick game had Muhammad all ways but loose. And I really do think round one was just perfect for him. As Zach said, I really do think the further the fight went on, I think Bilal Muhammad was eventually going to get stopped, because Leon Edwards just went out there with a point to prove, like we thought he would, and I do believe he did. Now, the finish was very, very disappointing. And like Zach said, I'm not a fan of eye-poking fighters either. Obviously, everybody knows why they do it, but if you don't, fighters have to judge range with grappling gloves. And to do that, in order to get a true estimate of range, they have to stick their fingers out to try and determine, whether they're within striking range of their opponent or not, and whether they can counter and so on and so forth. Now, this, of course, leads to a debate that's been raging for quite a long time underground. But now, of course, this fight's brought it to the surface. Do we need to introduce new gloves to the UFC? What a nasty eye poke. Now, I fully accept it wasn't intentional. I certainly don't think Leon Edwards intended to, because he didn't need to. He was already winning. But, that was one of the most horrifying eye pokes I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. Literally tears of blood running down Muhammad's eye. And, none of us want to see that, of course, because that was nasty. But, yeah, it wasn't like Petr Yan's finish over Aljamain Sterling, in which it was blatantly wrong. This one, to me, was far more accidental in every way, and it reeked of misfortune. And the fact that it came a week after we had such controversy is, it's very bad timing on Leon Edwards' part, because it will feed into the further hatred that Zach alluded to from other fans. But, from the positives we take from it, it was a fantastic fight, but it will lead to a debate that I'm sure we will be covering for months to come, and one that certainly does need to be had regarding the equipment the fighters use when they're in the octagon.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was actually really entertaining. I was fascinated. I did not know how Leon Edwards was going to do. We knew how good he was when he left off, but whenever he stepped in there, it looked like he didn't miss any time at all. He was just stalking Bilal down the entire time, just piecing his shots together. It was really beautiful to watch, and I was like, wow. Dana White said he was going to get the next title shot. That's going to be a good fight against Kamaru Usman, with his stand-up and his decent grappling as well and everything. That's going to be really interesting. Yeah.
The thing, sorry, it's a well-known thing around like the analysis circles is that it's really easy to look good against Bilal Muhammad if you're a southpaw, which Leon Edwards is, right? He's a southpaw, but he made it look extra good. Like, it's easy to look like that good against Bilal Muhammad as a southpaw. It's not easy to look that good. Like, he looked straight out incredible, but I don't exactly think that he should have a title shot. And also, I want to say this, if you look at the picture, there's this amazing picture that came out. It wasn't actually an eye poke. What happened is his finger got caught in the eyelid of Bilal Muhammad and tore it. His finger didn't actually touch the eyeball at all. It ripped, like it got caught in here, which is a similar thing happened to, I think, Randy Couture against Vitor Belfort with the glove getting caught in the eyelid. I think it's pretty similar scenario. people saying they want this fight to be run back. I don't think so. This fight was a short notice thing. It's not one that the UFC would exactly put together. And I think they see how it would go if it would have gone longer. So welterweight, in my opinion, is clear. You give Wonderboy the title shot. You do Leon versus Masvidal. You do Colby versus Burns. This is the way.
I can see that. Yeah. So I wasn't actually saying, I was alluding to, like, as I was watching the fight, I was like, okay, that would be a really good title fight. And then the eye poke happened, and I was like,
yeah.
Oh, I don't think you can give him the title shot after that. He needs one more fight. I think the Masvidal fight, and that's actually a topic later on that we'll get to, especially more in detail. But yeah, I was totally watching it. I was like, man, he looks amazing. I was like, man, Leon Edwards is a real contender, and I completely underestimated how good he was going to look. So for me, I wish obviously the best for Bilal Muhammad. I think he is a very tough fighter. I think he's a good fighter, but I don't think he's ready for the elite of the elite at welterweight yet. Leon Edwards, on the other hand, I think he's out there and he's looking to make a statement. He's still fresh. He's still ready to go. And the last little point, what Keelan said about the gloves, it's very interesting now because it's become a very big thing, very big issue. Obviously, I think we all know Trevor Whitman came up with a glove design where your fingers are automatically pointed down. I'm in favor of that, honestly, with what we've seen and everything, because the way fighters measure their distance, they do have their hands out and everything. And Leon Edwards' eye poke, it definitely wasn't intentional. It was almost like he threw the punch, and as he was throwing the punch, Bilal kind of ducked down a little bit, and he was kind of caught in transition, and his hand opened up, and then he caught the eyelid. That's what I kind of made of it. So, but with that, you wouldn't have that problem. So, or at least it would happen way less often and way less severe. So I'm personally in favor of that glove change, and I think it would prevent a lot less eye poke incidents because we see it almost every card. But yeah, great fight night topped off by a very unfortunate main event. However, I do think the way the fight was trending, you don't rematch it. I think you do Leon Masvidal, like Zach said. I don't know about the rest, but I think Leon Masvidal is the fight to make. And then Bilal, I still think he gets a good ranked opponent, but not that high ranked yet.
Yeah, what I'll say is just in sort of ending, first of all, I love the Mandalorian reference, perfectly snuck in. Decent layering, Zach. I love to see it.
Thank you.
But I do agree with what Zach said as well. There's not enough clout to make this fight again, because not only was it short notice and what we would consider a main event filler, but Leon Edwards breezed through the gears in the fight. And like Zach said, Bilal Muhammad historically has suffered against southpaw fighters, but Leon Edwards made it look easy against a tough guy. So there's no basis to make that fight again. He just looked too good. But yeah, in terms of what I was saying about the gloves, in Leon Edwards' defense, when you watch the replay, when he throws that jab or the distance gauge with his fingers out, he's actually throwing it as he's throwing the southpaw switch kick. Mm-hmm. So it's not that he's actually intending to stop Bilal. It is literally just gauging where he is to throw the body kick. And like you said, Jack, you're absolutely right. Bilal actually ducks slightly, anticipating the jab, and that's where the fingers connect into the eyelid. So Leon was very unfortunate, I think, because it was more a matter of where his opponent was rather than where he was actually putting his hand. But I do think it's time to have the debate about the gloves. And I think Trevor Whitman's gloves are the perfect solution all around, because they're not going to compromise a grappler, because they're still, I think they're like 5 or 6 ounce gloves. I think they're slightly heavier.
Yeah.
But like you said, they have a small padded hook so that the fingers are naturally inverted, so there's no more eye pokes. And it will help jabbing actually better too, because no one has to have their fingers out and risk getting countered more openly. So I definitely think it's a discussion that needs to be had. But yeah, if Leon Edwards is getting the next title shot, it's going to be a far more interesting fight than people think, because like I think I said on Thursday or Monday, I can't remember which, Leon Edwards is one of the only guys to ever take the reigning champion to a decision. And not only do we know how good Usman is, we've seen now how fast and good Leon Edwards is on his feet. Personally, I'd like to see him have 1 or 2 more warm-up fights just to get fully back into the groove so he's in the best condition to fight Kamaru. But based on what we saw on Saturday night, I certainly wouldn't be mad at it either. It'd be a great fight.
One more thing about the gloves. They actually tried to implement Whitman's gloves. Do you know what happened there?
Dana White didn't like it, right? Because he didn't own it.
Yeah, Trevor
Exactly.
Whitman owns the rights.
He wanted the patent. He wanted to own the patent.
Yeah.
But Trevor
That's
Whitman
right.
was like, no, he stood his
Yeah.
ground. And like
Yeah.
he should have standed his ground.
Yep.
I don't know. It just shows a lot of examples of how scummy Dana White can be.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with that at all, actually.
Yeah. Completely agree. And let's go ahead and transition to our next topic. And this has even more controversy. Aljamain Sterling did not include Matt Serra in his corner. That was obvious whenever he was fighting, but we didn't really know why. Now Matt Serra was coming forward saying he wasn't even told directly from Aljamain Sterling that he wasn't going to be in the corner. There was a lot of confusion going on. No one's really being upfront with each other. Zach, what do you make of this whole situation?
I thought Serra was done cornering because if I remember correctly, he wasn't in Weidman's corner against Akhmedov. But I do feel like this is a private situation that should not have gone public because all it does now is just create a lot more drama. And Aljamain Sterling needs a lot less of that. I've never seen never seen a guy get hate so much for getting kneed in the face. You know, it's kind of ridiculous how much people are hating on this guy. Like, I get it. He's acting stupid. It's mostly jokes, and everyone is just eating right out of his hand. They are just taking the bait and rolling with it. The whole Sarah situation, though, he probably should have had Sarah in his corner if he was very involved in the training camp. But at the end of the day, he doesn't owe anything to Matt Serra. You know, I think he should have told him why and like had an explanation beforehand, like why I think he shouldn't be in the corner, because he did also split camps with Extreme Couture. He was there for most of that part. So I think he would need to have mostly Extreme Couture coaches like Eric Nixick in there. And then obviously he had Ray Longo in there, but I do agree. It's kind of a scummy thing to do. It's pretty unfortunate, but I think that this should have been a private situation handled out, not in the public spotlight.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. And that is my starting point in examining this. This is a private argument that should never have been leaked, because what this does is this creates a nightmare situation for Aljamain Sterling. Not only is he immediately under intense scrutiny as the champion, but now a much beloved figure in UFC history who's coached him to the very large majority of his success is now painted out to be the good guy who's been wronged by the champion in question. So, like Zach said, and I absolutely agree with it, the last thing Aljamain Sterling needs or wants is his name mentioned, and certainly not in a negative light. He needs to be as quiet as possible and to fly under the radar for the next month or two to let the heat cool off. All this does is pour more fuel onto the fire for him and make him look even worse. Like Zach said, and I've been on this from the beginning, I've never seen someone get so much hate for having an illegal shot thrown at them. It's utterly insane to me. But if we're dealing with what we're dealing with, I don't like how this was handled by Aljamain. I really don't. Matt Serra has coached Aljamain Sterling pretty much from the beginning, and he's brought him to the very brinkmanship of being a UFC champion. And I think to ditch him the way he did, without even telling him, I do think was wrong. And especially when you have such a personal and sort of interdeveloping relationship with someone, to at least find out firsthand is the decent thing to do, no matter what way you split it. To have to find out from a friend of a friend or from social media is just wrong. And personally, I think if Matt Serra had been in the corner, I think Sterling would have fought a far better fight, because we covered this on the podcast straight after the fight. You know, you can bet anything that Matt Serra would have been slapping Aljamain for throwing those stupid elbow strikes. You know, sometimes you need someone like Matt Serra in your corner, not only an unbelievable wrestling and BJJ practitioner, but someone who's going to knock sense into you in between rounds when you need advice the most. So I think this is a bad look from all angles from Aljamain Sterling. You know, Matt Serra is one of the best coaches in the world. And not only did you dump him, but you didn't even tell him. And respectfully, of course, to Aljamain, I disagree with how he handled it. I think it creates a lot more pressure than he already needs at this point. And especially in life now and in the life of mixed martial arts more than ever, the court of public opinion have a lot of sway. And right now, Aljamain Sterling does not look good in their eyes at all.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree with anything you just said. I think you nailed it. Uh, it's again what you guys both said, Zach and Keelan. I mean, it should be a private situation. It's very iffy, and no one is really elaborating on it that much as well. Um, I, I honestly, just talking about the situation itself, it's just another bad look for Aljamain Sterling. He's taken a lot of heat for the acting and all of that. At the end of the day, it is what it is. It was an illegal knee. He definitely should not have continued, and he is the champion. All of the posts he's been doing and everything, it is a little bit. I mean, Daniel Cormier said he should probably stop posting on social media just because it creates a worse look for him in the way he won the belt. But that being said, uh, none of that is necessarily wrong. In this situation, I disagree. I completely agree with what Keelan said. I disagree with what Aljamain Sterling did. Matt Serra is one of the best coaches in MMA, in my opinion, and not only because of his technical advice, especially wrestling and BJJ. Couple other things too. He's been in Aljamain Sterling's corner. He's helped him grow as a fighter pretty much from the beginning. There's a reason he's so good on the ground, and I believe a large part of that reason is his work he's done with Matt Serra, and the game plan and the strategies and everything. So to just not have him in your corner, if you don't want to have him in your corner, that's fine. I know he was splitting camps, and I know he had different training partners and stuff, but just tell him. I'm sure there's no problem at all. Hey, it's all right. I don't want you in my corner just because of this or whatever, and that's all good. That's all well. But I think he definitely made a mistake, not only in not telling him. I think that's the wrong thing to do, especially with a guy who's been your friend, your partner, a guy who's been a mentor to you for basically your entire career. But I also think it's a bad decision not choosing him, and I think that also paid off against Petr Yan, not only for him trying to get the fight to the ground, but also the fact that, like Keelan said, the small stuff, the spinning attacks. He would not have kept doing those if Matt Serra was there, an experienced guy, and been like, "You're wasting so much energy. What are you doing?" And one last thing I want to mention about this is Matt Serra. Not only is he so good technically, he is also the best hype man a corner like you could wish for in a corner. The Iaquinta thing, I keep going back to that. The 5th round against Kevin Lee, he's screaming out, "One more round to go." Aljamain Sterling would be ready to go for that fight, be way more hyped up with Matt Serra yelling at him, especially with the lack of a crowd there as well. Just get light a little bit more fire under him. But overall, if he didn't want him in this corner, that's fine. That's his decision. But the way he did it, I can't agree with that. All right, guys. So let's go ahead and quickly move on to the next segment. And again, more controversy. Third one in a row, more controversy. UFC 259 saw Aljamain Sterling win the belt off of a illegal knee, a very blatant illegal knee from Petr Yan. And we saw another blatant, in my opinion, blatant illegal knee on this fight night in the fight between Eric Anders and Darren Stewart. However, this was called a no decision by Herb Dean, despite them being very similar. Zach, what do you make of all of this? The whole illegal knee situation from 259 to this.
Yeah, it's weird, and it also happened. And I woke up early to watch a Brave card, which is a promotion based out of the Middle East, and there was an illegal knee on that too. So there's been an illegal knee in the last 3 MMA events that I've watched. It's been a bit ridiculous. I think their process to determine what to do like after the knee, I think it's distance in a fight. I think it is, if it happens over 1.5 rounds, then it goes to a disqualification. That's what I've been hearing around. And that's why I think the Anders one wasn't as bad as the Jan Sterling. The Jan Sterling one was awful. Like that was like knee to the face, like full on. He had his hands on the back of Aljo's head, pulled him into the knee. The Darren Stewart one, it wasn't as bad. It looked Darren Stewart wanted to fight. You know, he was there. He wanted to continue. It didn't look like it affected him that bad, but the doctor called it off. I think this is just a real freak scenario, because before this, when is the last time you guys saw a disqualification or just a fight end to a no contest from an illegal knee? I think this is just a weird period in time that's going to pass. I don't think we really need to. Honestly, we should, legalize them. We should legalize them, because that makes things a lot easier. Legalize those 12-6 elbows and soccer kicks. Go back to pride rules.
Pride rules.
Go back. Reject UFC, go back to Pride.
Yeah, for the love of God, this is getting a bit crazy now at this point. Like Zach said, we've had 3 illegal knees in like the last 3 fight cards that we've seen. You couldn't write this. I kind of think we're asking the wrong question, and I think we're approaching this the wrong way. I think there's much, much clearer rule making needed as opposed to the rule itself, because referees clearly don't know what decision to give when this happens. First of all, as we noted on the last podcast or the one before, this is an incredibly, well, I said it's an incredibly rare occurrence, but we've seen 3 in 3
3 in a
weeks.
row.
So clearly someone's jinxing me. But especially when it comes to a title, an illegal knee is a very rare occurrence. But the referees, I think, need retrained on what decisions to give when illegal actions happen in fights. I think Zach's absolutely correct in this fight between Darren Stewart and Eric Anders. This knee was slightly different in that I felt it was slightly more in the moment, whereas with Jan, it was obviously premeditated. 5-6 seconds, bang, defenseless.
And Mark Smith said downed.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly. And this one, I don't think this one was premeditated. I think this one was more in the flow of things. In terms of legalizing the knee, I think it's a very interesting argument that you can go back and forth on for as long as you'd like. I personally can see why you would legalize it. Firstly, I think it would be very entertaining and it would stop fighters time wasting. That's an argument I've seen, and I do accept that. The problem is, not only is the knee a very hard part of the anatomy, but at force, it's like a baseball bat to the head, and it can cause a ridiculous amount of damage. I mean, think of how many times we saw that in Pride days.
Yep.
Now, if it's in the flow of action, I can see why, because it's very hard to determine whenever a fighter's down and whenever a fighter is still standing. So there is that argument to be made for discretion and when it's legal and when it's not. But in terms of legalizing it, I think I would lean more towards legalizing it on the lines of what Zach said. I'm getting confused now. Yeah, I would lean towards legalizing it. As for I think the elbows absolutely should be legalized, because Joe Rogan covered this very clearly a couple of years ago in his podcast. The whole 12-6 situation was banned because new judges and new commissioners saw these BS karate guys breaking fake bricks, and they thought they would break people's faces, and of course they didn't. So get 12-6 elbows back fully. I'm in agreement with that. Soccer kicks, I don't know about. I think, you're going to see broken jaws and teeth flying and that kind of thing. And I do think with mixed martial arts, as nice as it is to see sort of rowdy fights now and again, we do pride ourselves in discipline and sportsmanship and professionalism. So I think soccer kicks, there's a bigger debate that needs to go on there. But the elbows, I'm all in favor of bringing back, because there's no proven extra damage. Like whenever these were outlawed and John Jones got that disgraceful disqualification loss to Matt Hamill, all these reasons were given of, they're karate elbows and they're breaking things, and it obviously was never true. So elbows should be brought back. Knees, I wouldn't have much of an issue bringing back, because I think they're a legitimate part of combat sport. We've seen them years and years and years and years, and I do think they're absolutely legitimate. They're as legitimate as boxing, using leg kicks, anything like that. So in terms of the debate, I lean towards Zach's side on this for sure. I think there's a much greater argument for them being legalized than not. But then the problem is the Jan Sterling situation. Now, granted, a premeditated assault is very, very rare.
It does sound like a crime there.
Yeah, well, in many ways, to me, it was, because he saw an opponent down who couldn't get his hands up to defend himself and cracked him in the face anyway. That's the only scenario in which I have an issue with knees. Any other normal scenario, I would be in favor of implementing them and legalizing them for sure.
Yeah, I agree with that. Actually, almost completely. I think soccer kicks, and another big one in Pride was foot stomps. I don't think you can bring those back, because a heel to the face would definitely crack a skull. So,
oh yeah.
I I think leave those out, but I would be okay with Demetrius Johnson was big in favor of this. He's obviously in one now, and it's illegal in one. So a knee to the face. I think so. I think in the flow of action. I also think if they were legal, I don't think you would see the situation like Jan versus Sterling, because I don't think Aljamain Sterling would sit there knowing that he could take a knee. I think that he would always be moving because of that threat of the knee there. So I think if they were legal, I think there would be not as many situations where a guy would just be sitting there and take a knee to the face. Um, so yeah, I would be in favor of that. Obviously, 12-6. You don't even really need to argue that. That's just a no-brainer at this point. Needs to change. Anyways, I won't even talk about that. But yeah, it's such an unfortunate thing, and it was such a rarity. Now we're seeing it all the time apparently, but um, I agree with Zach here. I don't think it'll continue at the rate it does. We talked about this on the last podcast a little bit. If you do start to change the rules, it could go all over the place, especially with MMA rules. So I think they just kind of leave it how it is. I would be okay with it being legalized. And another thing I will say, the last thing we'll kind of bring up about this, because you guys kind of nailed it. I won't even add that much on, but what they really need to fix before anything is unifying all of the athletic commissions on the MMA rules, because it's ridiculous at this point. In one spot it's one hand down, another spot it's two hands down. Now obviously if a knee or your butt's on the ground, it doesn't matter, but it's the little things like that. The video replay, they need to sit down and get them all together and be like, okay, this is what we're doing, and this is how it's going to be, and agree on that, to where now fighters don't have to be confused, or referees for that as well don't have to be confused on what the exact rule is and everything, because we've seen that time and time again in MMA, and it's pointless. It doesn't need to happen. Just make the rules very clear, and even for the judges as well. The judges are already troubled as it is. Don't make it even worse for them watching the fight. That's first and foremost what needs to happen. They need to get together and make sure everyone understands what's supposed to happen, and hopefully we can see less instances. Not the Jan Sterling thing didn't apply to that, but less small things that could change. That's the first step that I think the UFC should take, or any MMA organization should take, in solving the MMA rule crisis at the moment.
100% agree. And I think that also plays into a larger thing where there should be one unified athletic commission, not one for each state.
Yes.
It would make things so much easier and so much better if we had a united set of rules. And, it could have, there wouldn't be judges who judge in some states, some in others. People wouldn't have to acclimate to rules every single time. Yeah, a nationwide athletic commission, maybe specifically for mixed martial arts, would be the best course of action. Yeah. But that's a fantasy world that we don't live in right now.
Yeah, I'm 1,001% behind that. I think this is the root of the problem with things like knees and the 12-6 elbows. There's kind of like the US as it is. There's too much federalization of rules. We need one unified organization to say to all fighters and all coaches, right, these are the rules that you're fighting under. Wherever you go in America, and even South America, I think too, these are the rules you fight under. Now there's no more excuses and no more gray areas for anyone to hide under. It definitely needs to be much, much clearer, because like you said, Jack, you can go to one state and it's one hand on the canvas. You go to another state, it's two hands down. In some states there's fight replay, in other states there's not, and it's ridiculous. These are some of the issues that drove so many fans away from boxing, because there were so many different organizations and so many different athletic commissions saying there's a standing 8 count in this state, but there's not in this. You can be saved by the bell here, but you can't here. You can punch above here, but not below here. And this is what mixed martial arts is becoming, and it has to be rooted out. Dana, Sean Shelby, the heads of One Championship, Bellator, Cage Warriors, everybody, I think, whether it's on Zoom or whether it's in person when COVID's over, they all need to get together and agree one set of rules, because it's becoming far too confusing. And this is where we need talks about whether knees are legalized again and all that kind of stuff. I think whenever we discuss this and we get to the root of the problem, I think this is the root of the problem. Whether you're discussing knees or elbows or whatever, this is what's causing all of this. And this is where all the issues are branching out of. We need one unified set of rules. I am so for that for sure. It's something we've needed for years.
Yeah, perfectly said, man. Let's go ahead and get into our fan questions now. And the first one comes from Mace Martinez. Obviously, we gave him a big shout out. And he will still be participating through these fan questions, which is kind of amazing. He has a really good one here, and we kind of talked about it a little bit. Let's go in depth now. Should Leon Edwards get an automatic title shot? Now, really quick, before I'm not sure if you guys are aware of this, but apparently Usman versus Masvidal 2 has been booked for UFC 261 per Brett Okamoto in
Since when?
Jacksonville.
I didn't
Sorry?
see that report. I need to go look at
I
that
didn't
was
say
official.
this.
Yeah, I didn't
Yeah.
see that either.
So apparently that title fight is booked.
That doesn't give him time to do it for Tough, which I thought that they were going to do. I thought they were
I thought
going
that's
to
what
push
we're
Tough
going to do
together.
as well. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, look at there it is as of 20 minutes ago. Wow.
Ladies and gentlemen, breaking news.
During
That's
podcast.
crazy.
Yeah.
Man. Well, that fight is really stupid, and Usman will just get Masvidal out of the way quickly so we can fight a real contender hopefully soon. Like fight Wonder Boy or fight the winner of Edwards versus no, never mind. Who is Edwards going to fight now?
So
Wait.
that's the question. Let's
Colby.
change that up. Who should Leon Edwards fight? Sorry, Mace. We're going to based off the breaking news. Who should Leon Edwards fight next?
Colby.
Let's screw up everything.
The Usman, the Leon versus Masvidal fight was perfect, but I do think that if he's going to have success against Usman in the second fight in their rematch, because he did take a round off of Usman, if I remember correctly. I think that was scored at 29-28, at least on one scorecard. But having to fight someone like Colby Covington would be good preparation. It would be better preparation for Usman again than anyone else he could possibly fight. And also, it's a very good matchup for him because if we know one thing about Colby Covington, we know his striking defense is below average at best. He gets hit so much, and that's why Usman will do worse for him in the rematch because with that Whitman jab, will just split that poor guard like the Red Sea and put him down before the third. Book it. It will happen. And I think Leon Edwards, who is a sharper striker, more precise, more accurate than Kamaru Usman is, will be able to exploit those defensive issues. And with his penchant for very good takedown defense and excellent defensive wrestling, he won't be able to be controlled over 5 rounds against Colby Covington. And on the feet, all we know Colby does is spam volume. He doesn't have technique to what he does. He just goes forward and he throws because he doesn't get tired. There's no technique into what he does. He just tries to drown the opponents in his volume. Leon will see that. He will pick it apart, and over 5 rounds, he can steal rounds on the feet super easily if he can defend the takedowns, which I think that he can. And of course, if the fight goes to the ground, then the advantage goes to Colby if he can hold him down, but I don't see that happening, and I think that's a really intriguing fight. I don't think Colby deserves the title shot. I see people saying Colby deserves the next title shot. Since when does a win over 2020 Tyron Woodley, after he's lost to Gilbert Burns already, deserve a title shot? Are we giving Luque one next then? I don't think so. Assuming Luque gets past Tyron Woodley. But yeah, I think that the best matchup now to make is Colby Covington versus Leon Edwards. The only other person is Gilbert Burns, but that matchup doesn't excite me as much.
Yeah, I think the perfect match for Leon Edwards to get him in the fighting condition is Colby Covington, and it's the best fight for 2 reasons. Number one, stylistically, Colby Covington's probably the closest match you can get to Kamaru Usman, so there's no better preparation than fighting someone like Covington's prototype. Secondly, Covington has given Usman the toughest fight he's ever had. A win over Colby Covington solidifies you as a title challenger because Covington's fight with Usman is still fresh in the memory of the masses. And to see someone, like, especially if he could knock out Colby Covington, can you imagine what that would do to his cause for a title shot?
It would give him fans.
Not only would it justify his rejection of previous fights, but now would elevate him into a dream position because it would legitimize him and people would see him as arguably the toughest stand-up test that Kamaru Usman's ever faced. Now, of course, what he would actually do to Usman and so on and so forth is a completely separate question, but I think that in Covington would be a fantastic fight. You know, we've broken down Colby Covington quite a few times in the podcast, and I have said before was that Colby Covington punches for volume. He does not punch for power, and he does not punch for technique. He punches because he can motor forward and because he's got an incredible gas tank. Now, those are excellent qualities to have, especially at 170, but you cannot leave below standard defense to someone like Leon Edwards, because he will blow your head off with a kick or a punch, and he's capable of it with both. So I think this is going to be a really, really interesting fight, because it is the fight that makes the most sense. Yeah, that would be really, really interesting. As for the breaking news that we've literally just heard on this podcast about Usman and Masvidal too, I think this is a really, really tough spot for Jorge Masvidal, because if he loses again to the champion, then it's very hard to see how he ever gets another title shot as long as Usman's champion. So he has to make this count. You know, a lot of people are going to see this just because Jorge Masvidal is a big name, and it will sell out, no question, as long as fans are allowed. But he's got to be very careful with this, because if he goes out and he loses a dominant decision again, he could have a lot of problems. Now, personally, I think Usman is going to win this again.
Easy.
And who knows, it could be Leon Edwards that ends up providing the toughest match for Kamaru Usman. Stylistically, Leon Edwards' gas tank is historically very strong, and we've seen how much more impressive his stand-up is. So we've seen stranger things in the UFC. This might work out even better for Leon Edwards than he could have predicted before. Personally, I do agree with what Zach alluded to earlier. I would give Wonderboy the title shot. And the reason I'd give it is this. Ever since Leon Edwards last fought, and I think it was, what did we say? It was June 19? Maybe a little bit before.
Yes. It was something like that, yeah.
Yeah, ever since before then, I think Wonder Boy's got 3 or 4 wins under his belt in that time, and I think he solidified the right to fight for the title again. So I'd give him the shot, and then whoever wins that, fight Leon Edwards. Now, of course, modern rankings don't work that way. They work according to who's the biggest name fights the champion. But if you're going to bring a legitimacy back to rankings, I think that's the first way to do it.
I want to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go for it. Go for it.
This also brings up something real interesting with the Usman versus Jorge, because there is a card in desperate need of a main event because of all the title shots being booked, and it's UFC 262, and the UFC 261 already has 1 or 2 title fights. I know
that's Valentina and Rose, yeah. So it already has 2.
It already has 2, so they're making it a 3 title fight card when UFC 262 still doesn't have a main event. And they're booking fights for it still. So I'm going to pose this question to you. Can you guys think of any possible main event for UFC 262? Because as of right now, it would be Beneil Dariush versus Tony Ferguson. And that's not a pay-per-view headliner. This fight, there's only a few people in the UFC who can headline a card and not be champions. Those would be Conor McGregor, Nate Diaz, Jorge Masvidal. 2 of those guys are out of the picture. So are we going to see Nate Diaz fight someone in the main event of 262? Doubt it. But I think honestly they might scrap that card because of the bad booking practices, because why they didn't put this fight on 262 is beyond me. It's just plain stupid.
I actually think that's an excellent point. Credit to you, Zach. I didn't even think of that. I think they're completely overloading cards instead of balancing them better, and that's what I would have done. I think Beneil Dariush, Tony Ferguson, and then that title fight would be a fantastic card in its own right. But we were saying this on the last podcast. Give the women their own card, because that's a solid selling point in itself. You don't need to stuff it with another title fight. I think that's the best way of doing things. Move Usman Masvidal to 262 with Dariush Ferguson as the co-main, because again, and I agree with Zach on this fully, Dariush Ferguson is not a main event fight. It's just not. I mean,
it is.
Yeah, it's a great fight, but it's not a numbered pay-per-view header. It just isn't. So I think that definitely would have been the better way to go with this. I don't know who's scheduling these, whether it's Dana or it's Sean Shelby, but whoever it is needs to look at it and bring it back. I do agree with that, absolutely.
What I think they'll do is they're going to move one of the women's title fights to 262. That's most likely what's going to happen.
I don't know.
I wouldn't do that.
I don't think so either. I think what they're doing is, and I think the reason they're doing this, and Zach, you told me, I think before the podcast started, 261 is going to have fans. It's in Jacksonville. It's going to have So they want to sell that thing out. They want to make that a huge card, return of fans. So that's why they're overloading it.
Yeah,
I agree with Keelan. I would like to see the women headline. They deserve it. We talked about that on the past podcast. I don't know. I do trust the UFC though. I do think they have something in their hands. I don't think Tony Ferguson Beneil Dariush. I don't even think that should be an argument. That's not going to be the pay-per-view headliner. That's not. It's just a fight that's already on there. They're going to find another title fight. So whether what that is, who knows? Maybe it's I don't. When is? Do you know when's 262? Is that May?
Yes, I believe so.
May?
Could be a 135 rematch.
They're not.
What? That
Maybe.
might be it. That's probably it. That's probably it.
I don't know if he'll be ready. I don't know if Sterling will be ready. I heard rumblings that May is the targeted date, but I think they're going to wait on booking that until Sterling is completely ready because, you have to deal with all the head issues that come from that and Jan's whole thing. We'll see. I think that is a very likely scenario. Again, we'll see. I think that might be what will happen, but I don't think we're going to see that booked until like the week before or like 2 weeks before, kind of like what Figueiredo and Moreno did, like the night of 255 to main event 256.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's the way they're going to go, honestly, because I saw April, May was when they were targeting the fight. And I think Aljamain Sterling will be good to go. I think Jan will be good to go. And that's another great pay-per-view card. And there might even be another one on top of that. Who knows? I know 155 has Gaethje versus Chandler's had rumors about that. Maybe they booked that fight for 262 as well. And not as the headliner, but like as a good co-main event. And then there you go. You have a great fight card. So there's ways to do it. I would have liked to see the women just take their own card, but I think the UFC's got a good thing going on. And overall, what are they doing with Usman Masvidal too? I just think Masvidal is going to get crushed. I don't think he stands a chance, especially with the way Usman's been looking right now. I think and Masvidal is with that stacked welterweight division. He's getting a title fight off of a loss, which isn't fair to the other guys who have been fighting and winning in that crazy mad circle that's been going on. Maybe Leon Wonderboy is the only other option because that was the fight they were looking to book for a long time as well. I do like Leon versus Covington as well. But man, just madness right now with UFC.
Or Chiesa.
I think he's a little too low.
Yeah.
But that would be a good fight.
Stylistically, yeah, maybe you're right actually about the rankings. Did we answer Mace's question, by the way?
Well, it changed because it was all over the place.
So quickly.
We did because we said Wonder Boy, and then we talked about Colby versus Leon.
Yeah.
What we think that Leon should do next, and then we said Wonder Boy should get the next shot.
Yeah.
So we did answer.
Yeah. Kind of. All right. Well, we'll, all of that's out of the way. A lot of breaking news on this podcast. We're covering it all. The last little segment for this comes from Carry On Chris. This is Chris De Santiago. New username for him. And he said, who is the best fighter outside of the UFC at the moment? Zach, let's start with you. Who do you think that is?
I don't want to be boring because there's the answers that everyone says. There's Mighty Mouse, which is probably the right answer.
Yeah.
You'll see people say Gegard Mousasi, Douglas Lima, AJ McKee. I want to throw a different name out there.
Right.
Someone who a lot of people don't even know. And someone who, when I watched him, I was like, oh man, this guy's the truth. And that would be Reinier de Ridder, the Dutch Knight, the current ONE FC middleweight champion, 13-0. In his last fight, choked out the reigning double champ and the king of ONE championship, Onglan Song, with a rear naked choke in the first round to steal the middleweight belt. And this guy's been tearing through high-quality opponents in ONE championship. He's looked like an absolute machine. He's shown absolutely no adversity so far. I think this guy is going to reign over the middleweight division in ONE championship for a while, and I love ONE championship. It's probably my second favorite promotion. It's so much fun to watch. It's just so good, and when I watch him, I realize that this is the guy. And if he comes into the UFC, I promise he's going to do big things. And I wanted to shout his name out there because, he's criminally unknown by the MMA community. People should know who this guy is. They should look at his record, see who he's beat at least before even watching him and see what he does well in the cage, like his technical ability. Just that alone should be impressive. And from what I've seen from Reinier de Ridder, I think outside of the obvious answers, I think he might be one of, if not the best fighters outside the UFC.
Man, there's so many fighters you could put for this and so many fighters you could fairly justify. I actually agree with Zach. I think the Ritter's a fantastic fighter, and I agree he's criminally underrated.
Yeah.
He's been on an absolute tear, and I think if you put him into the UFC's middleweight division, I think he'd be extremely competitive for sure. I think he's an absolutely fantastic fighter, and people should not be sleeping on him to the level that they are. In terms of who else there is, there's just so many. There's Juan Archuleta, who I love. There's Patricio Pitbull.
Oh, I forgot to mention Pitbull. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
Paul Daly, who obviously he's got his own circumstances, but I love watching him. Stylistically, I love Michael Venom Page. I just think he's so entertaining to watch. That shoot karate style's a nightmare for every style of fighter, really. I think he's absolutely fantastic. There's just so many you could name, really. Mixed martial arts just has such a swathe of talent in any division, anywhere you look. Man, there's so many. I'm going to put mine as the Ritter because I think not only is he so underrated, but he is ridiculously talented. And I think eventually you will see him in the UFC's middleweight rankings for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's perfect. I can't believe. Yeah, one is such an exciting organization, and DeRitter is for sure a guy to keep your eye on. I'm gonna stick with one though, and this is a bit of an obvious answer, I know, but I'm gonna throw some variation into it. Demetrius Johnson for me. I mean, one of the greatest of all time in the UFC. Period. The greatest of all time, in my opinion, for the men's flyweight division. Basically, created the division, and just dominated for so many years. And then still in one, he's still winning. He's still winning pretty dominantly. Obviously, we all saw how the Ben Askren Demetrius Johnson trade worked out. And I think that just really goes to show how rare and special of a fighter Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson is, and was in the UFC. And another reason I'm choosing him is because we've already seen what he's been able to do in the UFC. He's been able to dominate for pretty much forever, except for the only real loss he had was against a very close, arguable decision over Henry Cejudo the second time they fought. So he's still doing amazing. DeRitter, like you guys said, that guy is going to. He's one of those guys I want to see come into the UFC as soon as possible, because if he starts getting used to the competition in the UFC, oh man, he could be good. He could be really good. There's so many guys you could put up there. Yolo Romero is another dude who's just went over to Bellator. I'm interested to see how Anthony Johnson will look going into Bellator, coming off of his layoff. If he looks good, man, that's another dangerous dude. So, like Keelan said, there's too many to really pick down to one. But my official answer, just because of the absolute GOAT that he is and how he's still doing so good outside the UFC and one, has to be Demetrius Johnson as my pick.
One more shout out, a guy that I'm sure no one knows because, he's still in the very, very unknown circles. But in Brave FC, the card that I watched, what I saw from this guy and what everyone who's fought him has said is that he's one of he's the best fighter that they've ever faced. And that would be Abdisalam Ulu Kubanicbek out of Kyrgyzstan. Look to see him in the UFC next time they go to Fight Island. This guy is the truth. He just pressures people so hard. He just takes them down and punishes them with ground and pound. He's really fun. He's super good. And when I watched him, I was incredibly impressed. The UFC veteran, Rolando D, that he fought, said that he was the best guy he's ever fought. And he's fought in the UFC. So, that has to mean something, right?
Yeah,
I'll just throw one more name out there real quick because it's an organization I don't think any of us have mentioned, from Cage Warriors.
Oh yes,
Paddy Pimblett.
Yeah,
love him. I think, is he still their 145 champion? If not, he was for a long
time. Yeah.
Yeah, he's actually a very underrated fighter. A lot of his fights he did finish very highly technical submissions too. He's kind of like a smaller, blonder Darren Till. He's very, very loved by his native Liverpool, and I think he'd be a fantastic addition to the UFC too. But there's like we just said, there's so many different fighters. There's literally hundreds you could name. I have a lot of love for Demetrius Johnson too. The levels of disrespect he got still shock me. From the more new casual fan base. You know, his skill was so underappreciated until Ben Askren came in. And even when I saw that trade, I had to rub my eyes a few times because I thought, are they really trading 34-year-old Ben Askren for peak Demetrius Johnson? Am I seeing this correctly?
Yeah.
And, you know, posterity's proved who was right on that side. It was DJ. You know, DJ's a serial winner, and he will forever continue to be a serial winner. And, you know, I doubt he ever would, but I'd love to see him come back to the UFC one day, just so people finally appreciate what a complete mixed martial artist Demetrius Johnson truly is.
Yeah, and one more thing, I want to see more trades between organizations. I think that would be super cool. Do more of that.
Yeah,
as long as they're actually right this time.
Yeah, Dana would be a bad football GM just showing by the trades that he's making.
Yeah.
Make someone else the GM. Let him do the public PR stuff.
Yeah, I love that. I was so excited whenever that. I thought we were going to see trades left and right from there on, just all over the place. I love that for sure. All right, guys. Well, this was an amazing podcast. Zach, thank you so much for coming on. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube. You can listen. We are everywhere, iTunes, Spotify included. Make sure to go ahead and follow us on Instagram, MMA.island, and check out all of our work on MMAisland.net. Zach, thank you so much for coming on today.
My pleasure. It was a lot of fun.
Yes, man. Thanks for being with us. Great to have you.
Yes, yes.